journey together.
I'm Madi Hernandez-Tooten.
And I am Erica Eckert, and we are your hosts.
In Hebrews 10:24, it tells us to consider how to encourage one another to love and good deeds.
Yes, and motivated by this truth, our desire is to create a space where our God stories can inspire us and point us to His character. Well, hello. Our guest today is Megan Ross. Megan, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you for being with us. Megan is a native of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and as you'll hear in her story, she has moved around a little bit since she was born, but she now resides in Lancaster and a neighbor, so thank you for being with us. Megan is married to Dave, and they have 2 children. Megan loves to do outdoors activities, hiking, biking. She walks her dog out, or the dog walks
Yeah,
her.
yeah.
And you said that you like to plant things and play with dirt
Yes.
outside.
Yeah.
So I love the conversation when she was telling us this. Erica asked, "Do you have a garden?" She's like, "No."
She loves gardening, but doesn't have a garden.
Right.
So
I do love the beauty that the outdoors brings. Like,
That's great.
yeah. And I mean, I do tomato plants and stuff, and
who doesn't?
yeah.
Yeah.
So
And Megan, you live in a musical home.
yes.
Your husband leads worship, amazing. Your son plays the drums, also crazily, and your daughter sings. So what do you bring to the table musically to your family?
Musically, probably nothing. I am good at like karaoke stuff and dancing, like definitely. So
The fun part.
yeah, exactly. So I'm like the private kitchen dancer. Like, yeah.
Let's
So,
leave it private.
yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for being with us. Megan has chosen the name of God, Jehovah Jireh. And Jireh, the Hebrew word, means provider or to provide. And we hear the story in Genesis 22. We read that Abraham was obeying God in actually sacrificing his son Isaac, because God had asked him to do that. But God comes in and provides a ram to be sacrificed instead of Isaac. So Abraham calls God Jehovah Jireh, the provider for what they needed at that moment. And the Hebrew word also means to perceive or to experience. And I love that added meaning that God not just provides what we need, but that He is in tune with our needs. He is perceiving our hearts and then just providing accordingly. So I'm so glad that you chose that name, and I look forward to hearing your story. You have tissues there, so I'm prepared for anything. But please tell us, how has God, the provider, Jehovah Jireh, been that provider to you in your life? Tell us what you have.
Okay. Well, I chose Jehovah Jireh because I thought that it would be an easy one to do, and I thought that there are lots of ways that God has provided for me throughout my life and for our family. So I would be able to just choose a topic, keep it really surfacey, and it would all be fine. Sharing in a Q&A setting like this, video chat, is not really my desired way for relational interaction. I get nervous that people I don't know personally are watching and can be critiquing me and my emotions and my journey, without being able to have that dialogue to talk about certain things. So as I thought that I had my topic that I was going to do, I asked Dave if he would sit down so that he could just kind of help me go through it and see what I needed to subtract or add or whatever. And I said, "So what do you think?" And he was like, "Oh, that sounds really great, babe. Like, I think it's fine." He's like, "But, I'm still struggling with why you're not sharing the way that God has provided most for you in your salvation story." And so I answered him and I said, "Well, I'll tell you why." Because what you say makes sense. Like, God provided a sacrifice for Abraham and he provided the final sacrifice for me, for all of us, so that we could be made righteous and be able to spend our eternity with him. He provided salvation through Jesus. But I was going to go with what I chose because that topic was easier. I felt safer talking about what I chose. I didn't have to be vulnerable. And I didn't have to bring up a lot of stuff from my past that is very emotional and comes from a very broken part of me. So anyway, I wrestled through it a little bit with God, and so here I go.
Don't you just love when God does that? Like, you don't love it. It's hard at the moment. But I'm glad that your husband called you out on that. And it's like, hey, why don't you think about that as well? Thank you for being obedient.
Sure. And vulnerable, the hard part.
So I come from a divorced family. My parents were married young and had 2 children. I have an older brother from that marriage. They got divorced when I was about 2 years old, and back then it was very common that mothers gained custody of children, and which my mom did. As a child and teen, I moved regularly. That single fact made it hard for me to feel like I was able to establish roots anywhere. After my parents divorced, we moved to Texas, and then we moved to Florida, where I lived till I was around age 9. Growing up in a different state than my father resided in meant that my brother and I would fly up here and spend 2 weeks during the summer with my dad and family. You can imagine what kind of effective relationships are built over phone conversations in 2 weeks out of the summer. At age 8, my older brother and I were separated as he was sent up here to live with my dad and family. And that was something that was really hard on both of us. We always kind of had each other, and I think that growing up in a divorced situation, there's nothing like that sibling relationship because you have someone going through the same thing with you. And that was lost at that point. So it was hard. At age 9, my mother remarried, and shortly after that, we moved up here to Pennsylvania. 5th through 12th grades, I went to Ephrata, I went to Manheim Township, I went to Lampeter Strasburg, and then I was back down in Florida for a half a year, and then back up to settle my graduation year at Manheim Township.
So
You were everywhere, yeah.
I mean,
Wow.
Yes, it was a lot of
I
moving.
mean, even the schools.
Yeah.
In every district.
It was the move in my 8th grade years and beyond, I think that were the hardest for me. The choices and attitudes that I had about life were a direct result of what I saw and experienced in my life growing up. I observed selfishness, conceit, infidelity, manipulation, self-preservation, horrible communication, grudge holding for days to, screaming and yelling. I experienced the effects of drunkenness and marijuana use within our family, and I embraced the mentality of I did for you and so you owe me. This left me feeling so many different emotions as an adolescent and a teenager. I felt lost, alone, felt lonely, insecure, unwanted, unloved, and even unlovable. I felt like I couldn't trust anyone. It was in my senior year of high school, and I was living with my aunt and uncle at the time, that I was diagnosed with clinical depression, and twice spent a week where I couldn't even get out of bed. The doctor said I had chronic fatigue syndrome. There were times when I would be driving that I thought, if I would drive off this bridge right now, nobody would even miss me. I ended up layering unhealthy habits on top of unhealthy habits to try to find and gain acceptance and value and love. I resorted to self-medicating my pain and hardships while trying to make any sense of my life.
That makes complete sense that you you're a young kid and you're going through so much and you're trying to figure out, how do I make this better all by yourself?
Yeah.
So you resort to these other, like you said, unhealthy things.
I started drinking when I was 13, and started using marijuana. I had unhealthy relationships with boys, just seeking one thing after another. I started stealing, and not necessarily just petty things. I just had that entitled attitude that the world owed me for these crappy cards that I was dealt in life, and so if I couldn't afford it, then I would just take it.
What were you trying to fill at that time? Did that even cross your mind as a kid? Like, I'm missing something. There's
Yeah.
What was
I wanted to belong. I didn't have any, like, I had no belonging. Like, I had no roots. I had moved around so much that, both my parents were remarried and had children in marriages, and so yeah, I was looking for a sense of love, of acceptance, of belonging. It was about 2 weeks after my 18th birthday when I was arrested for shoplifting at our local mall. They handcuffed me and put me in the police cruiser and sent me downtown for fingerprinting. I was so scared, and all I wanted to do was call my mom, but they wouldn't let me. They told me that I was a legal adult and that I just had to deal with it. Yeah. So they processed me and gave me my court date and things like that. I got that in the mail and everything. But it was that same exact week that I went into my job at a dry cleaner's. And as I approached the back of the store to clock in, there was an older gentleman there and a couple other workers. And I will never forget how gently this man spoke to me. He said, "Megan, don't take off your coat. You won't be staying." He says, "We've been tracking you for a while now, and we have proof that you've been stealing from us. I don't know what kind of troubles you are having in your life, but I've decided not to press charges and contact the police. However, we will be keeping your last paycheck as repayment for some of the money you've stolen." This man basically wished me well, and
Show you grace.
yeah. And to this day, I think to myself, who does that? And I'd like to think that this man was a believer.
And if he wasn't, God used him
Yeah,
to
for
show
sure.
you grace. So you're 18, 19 now, 18 years old, and you've gone through so much as a child and now as a teenager. Some of it was your own choices, and some of it was what was happening in your home and around your life. You're strong. That is, God protected you, gave you strength to get to even that place of 18 or 19. But when did you hit rock bottom?
Yeah, that actually leaving that dry cleaner, that was my rock bottom. I immediately drove across the street and to use the payphone to call my best friend and tell her what happened. And in that conversation, I knew that I wanted a change in my life. I couldn't, there was nothing else. I was just getting deeper and deeper, that I was getting arrested, into these bad choices that I was making in life.
So would you say that arrest was
Yeah.
okay, this is gonna go a whole different level if I continue
Yeah.
in this way?
That was my rock bottom. Yeah. So it was a process and a long journey. A huge part of that journey involves my best friends letting me move in with them. Even in all the craziness God had quietly provided my best friend Bryn, who was a Christian. And from my understanding, I thought that I was too. I had went to church every other weekend with my dad's family when I was younger, probably ages like 12 to 14-ish. In my teen years, I stopped going to church. I went through confirmation classes, I was baptized, I went through all the formalities. So I thought I was good to go. I thought there was really nothing else to becoming a Christian until I actually learned what it meant to completely surrender my will to the Father's and to have a personal, intimate relationship with Him.
I'm glad you make that point, or that you pointed that out, because so often you said you had confirmation and you were going to church, you were doing all these things, but that wasn't changing your life. Obviously, you were struggling, you were depressed, you were doing all sorts of things. So what does that mean, I surrendered? What does that look like?
It was just a complete, like, it's giving up. It's giving up your will, because I know that everything that I was doing was continually leading to even more heartache and more bad decisions. And you know, it's like you come to the end of yourself. It's like, okay, it's do or die. Like, I've got nothing left. I don't know. So I guess I'll try this God thing.
Nothing on your own was working.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there, at that point, there were a couple of former high school friends that we had that were partiers. And they told Bryn and I that they were tired of the party scene and that they were actually starting to go to church.
Is that a coincidence?
Yeah.
I just got the chills right now. Or it's like, seriously, is that a coincidence?
Yes.
Goodness.
And so they invited us to go along, and we found out about this thing called Tuesday Night Bible Study that was pretty big in Lancaster back then. It was a student-led gathering that had contemporary Christian worship, which I had never heard a contemporary Christian song in my life before then.
Is that when you started dancing?
Yep. Shortly after, yeah. So, and then it was, you know, they had a speaker that would give a message then. And it was really actually kind of like a youth revival is what I would kind of equate it to now. So Bryn and I gave it a try, and as we attended week after week, Tuesday Night Bible Study really started to change my heart and my life. I saw people there with joy unspeakable. I saw authentic worship. I saw young hearts being poured out, whether it was in brokenness or gratefulness. And as I would look around the room during worship times, like I would see just youth raising their hands in surrender and praise. And most times it seemed as though the sermons were being spoke right to my heart. I started to feel that pull of, I want what these people have. Like, I want, like, how do you get that, God? Like, what, you know? But the lifestyle was so foreign because it was like being in another land. Like, I didn't grow up in that. Like, I didn't know any of that. I know now that through this, God was starting His mighty work in me. Bryn and I continued to attend TBS, and we would also go to church on Saturday evenings, and then we would get up and go Sunday mornings. I called.
You were all in.
Yeah, I really was. It was so good. I call that period of my life the saturation period.
Did you go to the same church, the same service, or would you attend different
No,
churches?
on Saturday nights we would go to worship center, and then on Sunday mornings we would go to the church that Bryn and I and her family would go to. So, yeah. It was such a sweet, amazing time that God provided in my life. I remember one night sitting in my room alone, and I had been reading some of my Bible, and I did what you see so many other people do. I said, God, if you want me to believe this Bible and what this says, you're gonna have to show me. I want to surrender my life to you and live for you. And that night was a changing night for me. I felt like God met me there in that little prayer. It wasn't anything spectacular like fireworks or anything like that. It was really, he just simply provided an overwhelming peace like I had never felt before. And as I continued to walk this new faith journey, I was still struggling with my depression. I was fine as long as I was on my medication, but would bottom out if I stopped taking it. I always hated having to take this medicine. And then one night, the group of us that went to TBS together, we were hanging out. We must have been talking about my struggle with depression. And one of them said, hey, let's lay hands on Megan and pray for her complete healing. So I got down on my knees and they encircled me and they laid their hands on me and they prayed for me. And this was God providing a miracle for me. And I received his healing. And it reminds me of the Bible verse in Matthew 17:20. And it says, because you have so little faith, truly I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to the mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. Through the early days of my faith journey, I continued to go to church and attend different studies, and through the power of the Holy Spirit, make changes that I knew were pleasing to the Lord and also so beneficial for me. Being a new believer and an immature Christian, there are many things that I struggled through and stumbled over that I didn't fully understand.
You're a baby.
That's right.
Definitely toddling around, yes.
So I went to the local Christian bookstore and I bought myself a Bible dictionary so that when I would come home from church and in my notes had stuff that I didn't understand, I could look these things up to see what they meant and how I could apply them to my life.
I love that transformation, of I didn't know jack squat about God, and here I am with the Bible dictionary.
On your own.
Right, the thirst that he gave you for him. It's beautiful.
I love that.
Thank you. And I sought the Lord and continually knocked at the door, and God continually showed up and provided for me. I always would reference the verse of Luke 11:9 that says, so I say to you, ask and it will be given. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened for you.
When you say that, do you see then him providing for you in other ways, not just for that salvation moment or your first steps? He continues to provide for you in what ways?
He does. Even now, he is continually writing my story and providing for me. He's provided my beautiful family, my wonderful husband, who is a godly man that seeks the Lord with all of his heart, and children that believe in the same God. And just that security of my family that I've always wanted and desired, he's provided. An amazing church with amazing teaching and friends and just that security, so many things. There's so many things. And if I'm not distracted by my daily life, I pretty much stand in awe of how God provides for me in each and every situation.
So
and you know that he will continue to do that.
Yes.
That's the beautiful part, is that it continues. So if you could tell your younger self something, your younger self that's struggling, feeling accepted or loved, or your younger self that was ready to throw yourself off the cliff, or your younger self that was seeking approval from so many other things, what would you say?
I would say don't give up. I would say there is better. And there's a lot that that goes into it. I try to tell my kids, because I feel like it's so hard to just nail down things that what would I tell myself? Because it's hard. It's hard being a Christian, being different from the world around you. But the peace and the joy and that comes with having that relationship with Jesus is so greater of a life to be living than what I knew of living without him. I do feel very blessed. It might sound weird to know a life without Christ, but now to know my life with Christ is just so much richer and has so much more value.
Thank you, Megan, for sharing your story and God's beautiful, I see it like this woven, grace throughout your whole story, even before you came to know him, his protection and his provision, and even in some of the hard things that I'm sure you have that you didn't share, but to see that he was keeping you and bringing you to this place. I love that. One of the things that stood out to me as you were sharing was, I think of, when you have that side of the tracks and this side of the tracks, and God's not calling you out from one side and saying, Megan, come over here. He was like, I'm going over. Yeah. I'm going over the tracks, and I'm pulling you out. And that, to me, was this beautiful thing of, he's not holding the bar up this high, and he's saying, when you get your act together, Megan, come talk to me. He's like, no, I'm going to go over. And I just love that he meets us. I mean, it comes back to that God with us. He's right there, He came to meet you where you're at, and I love that your story is a beautiful picture of him pulling you out and not saying, get it together, you shouldn't be doing that, you shouldn't. It was, I'm here just as you are. When you're ready, I'm here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for choosing the hard part to share. Yeah, because that's what makes a difference. Yeah.
We'll see you guys in April for our next God story. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.